Welcome to the Essential Tax Podcast with your host, Mishkin Santa. In each episode, we'll take the complex world of tax, all the jargon, acronyms, and stuff that make your eyes glaze over, and explain it in an impactful way to understand the complex and unknown areas. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, thewolfgroup.com. Now, here's the host of Essential Tax Podcast, Mishkin Santa.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Today's podcast is a podcast I've been meaning to do forever. I must get the question almost once a week from different people that call in. The story goes like this. Mish, I'm going to be moving to Portugal and I need to understand what are the U.S. tax consequences when I get there. I need to understand what the Portugal, how their tax will work. What are some other things that I need to think about? And it's just a very, very common question I've been getting for the last couple of years. And I thought to myself, let's get Catarina on the show. Let's ask her all the questions that all my clients want to know. See if she can give us kind of a warm introduction about Portugal. Maybe go through some non-tax stuff, tax stuff. Talk to us a little bit more about what's kind of happening, current trends and issues. So here we go. We got Catarina on the podcast. I'm so glad to have you here. Catarina, why don't you tell everybody who you are, give some updates about your education and background, and then we'll get into the questions.
Thank you, Mishkin. This is really an honor to be here with you in your podcast. And my name is Catarina Breia. I'm currently a partner and head of tax of Nexia Santos Carvalho in Portugal, where I have been leading in developing the tax practice since 2017. I have a degree in economics. My first connection with international activity was while I was in the university. I did my Erasmus in Barcelona, and that was really fascinating because you need to have in consideration that it was 30 years ago.
Wow.
So this was really my first international experience, and this put me in contact with various persons from which I'm still a friend of, which was really nice. And this was like the beginning of my international experience. Then I started to work in 1998 in KPMG. So at the time I started as a tax journalist. So I had experience in corporate tax, M&A, transfer pricing, and so on. And this was really interesting because I had the opportunity to work back then with some of the brightest minds in the tax field at the time. So not only Portuguese, but also international. Like I had a partner to which I reported that was English, another one that was Brazilian, but had a prior US experience. So I had like a feeling of the international field that was really important to broaden my horizons. Also at Nexia Santos Carvalho, I serve as a member of the Nexia International Tax Committee, and I actively participate in several business groups, and it was where I met you, Mishkin.
Yes.
Actually, we will be in another meeting in a week now.
That's right.
Munich.
We'll be in Germany.
In Munich. So the international tax advisory is really a part of my work that I really like. And besides that, I'm also a qualified accountant, auditor, and tax arbitrator. On a more personal note, I'm married. I have three sons, two sons and one daughter. And I think it's also important, all those areas are important to build a complete tax professional, because at the end of the day, a tax professional needs to have knowledge about tax, the ability to think strategically, the interest in continuous learning. In tax, we never have a boring day, right?
That's right.
And lastly, but not less important, we need to understand the people and the businesses behind the numbers. And that is where I think the balance is between expertise and humanity. And that's the luggage I try to carry with me every day.
Well said, well said. And I'm glad you said that, because I was looking back just this morning at my pictures from the Nexia conference that you guys hosted. I think a couple different firms may have hosted it, but back in 2022, in June of 2022, and I'm looking at the pictures of my daughter. I think she was about 2.5, maybe 3 years old. I had to lug around a car seat for her all throughout France and Spain, all the way down to Portugal. And I remember the biggest thing from that I remember about Portugal is we'd previously been in Spain, and this is the end of June, mind you. It was very, very hot. And I remember I told my wife, I said, what's the point of taking a shower when I immediately just walk out of the apartment and I'm immediately sweating? And then we got to Portugal, and it was like 10 to 15 degrees cooler. And I was like, wait a minute, what just happened? Like, how does it, where did the weather just drop at? Like, why is it so nice here? So with that, and let me say that conference was awesome. I had a great time at that conference. But I want to use that to dovetail into, tell us about Portugal. Let's start with the non-tax stuff. Why do people want to go there? Tell us about, lifestyle, cost of living, other things that people may not know that are listening to this podcast.
Yes, of course. When we talk about why Portugal, the basics is the lifestyle, of course. And you have experienced that while being here, and you can understand what I'm saying. So Portugal is lots about food, climate, of course, the cost of living, which is much lower than in the US. Actually, I see lots of Americans coming, even average Americans coming to Portugal because exactly of that reason. The cost of living, the cost of buying a house, it's much lower here than in comparison with the US. So, and besides that, we also have lots of history and also options in terms of recreational opportunities. So Portugal is well known because of the surf, wine tasting, hiking, cities full of heritage. We discover the world, so I think those are the soft arguments. Of course, people might select either Lisbon or Porto as the biggest cities in Portugal, and they are very similar to whatever cities you can think of. So they have good international schools. They are really not as different as European cities. And also, if you want more sunshine, golf, a slower pace of life, you may choose Algarve, for example, or even Madeira and Azores, which are unique natural landscapes, full of insular charm and high quality of life, but also tax incentives, because they have these incentives to attract persons to live there. And of course, the language. We in Portugal, we speak very well English. You cannot say this from many countries in the world, but you can say it here. And also, from a business and strategic point of view, you can. Portugal is like the door to enter Europe. So it's a strategic location to international mobility. We see that every day. Also, Portugal has a clear path to residence and citizenship for foreign residents into Europe. Has recently been recognized as a fast-growing innovation and tech ecosystem, like home of the Web Summit, strong startup culture, and talent attraction policies. And you actually see over the last few years lots of shared service centers being created here, because we can either assist Asia in the morning or Europe during the day.
Oh, because of your
Or yes, and also Americas in the afternoon. So we cover all time zones, and that's why I think it's especially for global mobile professionals, it's a perfect spot, because you can be in every time zone that you want. And besides that, you also have the tax argument that we will discuss afterwards, and that, of course, that may leverage the lifestyle arguments.
Oh, absolutely. And if I understand correctly, a lot of Hollywood actors and actresses are also seeking Portugal out. Is that right?
Yes, that's true. I think not every day, but every week we saw on the news, well, Nicole Kidman or Madonna has chosen Comporta, which is an area near Lisbon, to buy a house and to live here. So we are seen as the Hamptons of Europe.
I love that. I'll have to tell my wife all about that.
Yes, but well, the thing is, in order to leverage from all these opportunities, you need to plan in advance, because otherwise you might be caught in some traps.
Absolutely. So without further ado, let's get into the good stuff. So talk to me about the most common issues you see with US people moving to Portugal. Like, if I'm an American, what in your head are the things that you want to say, hey, be careful with this?
Well, when you started this podcast, you said, well, my clients tell me I want to know everything about the country, but sometimes they tell me I'm going tomorrow to Portugal, right?
Right.
Well, and then you just said, well, let's see what we can do to mitigate your tax burden. Okay. So basically, that's the thing. If Portugal can be a fantastic country to be in, but you need to think strategically and to plan in advance, I would say, in order to maximize the benefit, because you need well, the issues that I found recently occasionally when I deal with American clients is that they arrive in Portugal with pre-existing structures, which are perfectly legitimate of course, in the US, but they might be tricky from Portuguese perspectives. And I'm speaking about S corporations, LLC, partnerships, that don't really have a clear equivalent in the Portuguese law. So they may need, they often need prior adaptation and implementation in time, and that would be your business. And we should work together in that alignment. So I would say that a careful analysis before arrival is absolutely essential.
And so let's just say that I had someone that had stuff like that. How much time on your side would you need to analyze and give proper guidance? So I'm not going to, put you on the spot for a specific type of business entity, but let's just say I'm an individual, I'm an owner of a certain type of US company. So I've got that in play, and I'm thinking about coming over with my family, and I'm going to be, I'm a C-level executive working for that company, and I'm going to be, we're doing remote work, basically directing the company from Portugal. I'm not asking you to go into all the issues. There's a ton of issues there. I can already.
Yes, let me, probably I can share with you a recent case that I had. Okay. And this was a live case. So a very successful author in the US who was publishing through her own S corporation. And from the US point of view, that organization is transparent for tax purposes, right? So
that's right.
According to the Portuguese law, by other hand, this definition is quite limited. So we faced several, due to the tiny timing between her coming with her family and the analysis that has been done, that planning, that prior analysis and implementation of a plan to address those constraints was not put in place. So I think there were a number of doubts that arose that could put her in a situation where she could be taxed at approximately 50%.
Wow.
Of taxes. So this was just to give you an example of a situation where sometimes you don't have time to address things perfectly, especially from your perspective. And this is a question that you probably would need to address with the prior timing. Ideally, and to be completely honest, I think if you are planning to come to Portugal, let's say, you should start thinking between 2 and 1 years before in planning everything, not only from the legal side, but also to the tax side, just to make sure that you mitigate all these risks. Of course, you can do it in lesser time, but that really depends on the structures that you have, right?
Yeah. I think the more complicated the structures, the less, with a short fuse and a short period of time, that will always lead to bad results, in my opinion. And some of these structures that you kind of mentioned, for example, the S corporation, I mean, you're talking about someone that probably either has to make a C corp, we maybe kill the S corp election to make it a C corp, or maybe just wind down the company altogether. You're talking about payroll because they have to pay themselves a reasonable wage. You're talking about potentially 401ks and insurance and all sorts of stuff. I mean, this isn't just something that you just turn the key off. It's like a car where you just push the button and like, oh, I'm done. And then there's the real life side of the equation, which is, well, wait a minute, I'm doing business. Like, I've got a business name, I've got an operating agreement, I may have employees. Like, you're asking me to like completely upend my entire line of business. Or my entire business structure just for this particular issue, which is probably well worth it. But like you said, if you have more time, a year or two,
yes,
you can plan that out to do a lot better. There could be a wide variety of solutions to that issue. But I think what I'm hearing is the longer the runway that you have, the more planning you can do and set yourself up for success and not have to rush through everything and end with a bad result. You probably get a good result in the end.
Yes, exactly. And probably that brings us to the starting point, which is the criteria for personal tax residency in Portugal. And
sure. Tell us all about that.
Let's talk about that, because I think that's the starting point that we need to consider.
Okay.
Well, what we normally see is that Portugal, when Americans come to Portugal, sometimes they of course they have their life in the US, and the consideration that they will continue to be tax resident in the US. That's a constraint. But people usually plan their move based on when they want to live, where they will stay with their family, and where they will be working, either remotely or for a company or whatever. But in Portugal, to be considered a tax resident, you have it looks simple, but it can be complicated, especially because Portugal looks to there is a formal criteria. So for you to be a tax resident, you need to spend more than 183 days in the Portuguese territory within a 12-month period, whether this might be consecutive or not. Or maintain a dwelling that suggests intentions to reside permanently. So just on one of these conditions is enough.
Oh, wow.
People often think that, being more than half a year is the criteria, but if you have a house and if you have a family, your family living there permanently, probably you can trigger tax residency. And you need to consider, despite the formality, the tax residency or whatever, you need to make sure that you cover all the substance as well. And also, we have, you also need to have in consideration that Portugal applies a partial residency regime. So, meaning that, for example, if you arrive to Portugal in November, 1st of November, you can be a resident, provided that you meet one of those criteria that I've just mentioned, between the 1st of November and 31 December, meaning that until 1st of November, you might be resident elsewhere. And after that date, you might be considered a tax resident in Portugal. If there is any double taxation issues that need to be solved, those will need to be dealt after 1st of November. And this might be interesting also to planning purposes, right? Because you might, for example, in a situation where you have sold shares, for example, of a company or whatever, if this happens before you becoming a tax resident in Portugal, they will not be needed to be disclosed here in Portugal. For example, in comparison, Spain does not have that. You are either a full year tax resident or non-tax resident. So this gives room to leveraging.
Okay. And just to be clear, though, in Portugal operates on a calendar year for their taxes, not a fiscal year. Is exactly. That right? Okay. So get the calendar year that matches up. Let's talk about specifics about why Portuguese tax and why Portugal remains kind of an attractive place to be at. Because everyone I talk to says, well, the golden visa is done. And I'm like, well, that's not the way I interpret it. I don't think the golden visa is done. I think we're just shifting into a different, and I'll let you obviously tell us, but in my head, I'm like, it's still there. I think you have options, but we're just shifting into a different way that you look at it. So tell us about the golden visa program and the frequently used visas that you guys have. There's a bunch.
Yes. So just to when people start about relocating, they start normally by the visa, addressing the visas, and this is okay, but you should not lose the tax side, because sometimes when you choose a certain visa, from a tax perspective, you need to tell a story, and sometimes when you use a certain visa and then from a tax perspective you tell a different story, some things may not match. So that's an important thing to consider and to be aware of, is that when you normally talk with lawyers for immigration purposes, they just cover the legal side, and it's important to also cover the tax side at the same time. So the tax experts should also be together addressing these constraints. Having said that, what I can say from seeing it from the Portuguese perspective to someone that wants to obtain a visa in Portugal, whatever visa this is, I think you need to the process, getting a visa will take time, okay? Have that in consideration. And we recently had, like maybe 2 or 3 years ago a change in the immigration authority that was replaced by from CEF to AIMA, so different authorities. And this led to they had to deal with a larger backlog of applications. So you need to be conscious that this is not an immediate thing. It needs to be applied, and then the process may take long time. So this needs to be put in consideration. And then you need to also consider what are choosing a visa instead of another might give you faster access to obtain the visa, so that the choice of the visa might also put you in a position of having an application being more fast than others. So, for example, normally people that just have passive income, they tend to choose the D7 visa. D8, the digital nomad visa, might be chosen by professionals. But again, when you just see the legal side and not the tax side, you may enter into a few difficult situations. So you can either choose the D2 entrepreneur route, or you can choose the highly qualified workers and researchers that use the D3. And of course, you have the golden visa. The change that you are mentioning had to do, well, the golden visa is in force, but it is not in force the way it was before. Before, it was mostly used by someone that wanted to invest in real estate. That does not longer apply. So currently, you cannot obtain a golden visa just buying real estate. But you have other options. So you have, if you invest into qualifying investment funds, or if you invest in arts or cultural heritage projects, or if you make a capital transfer in research and funding, or if you create a business or with certain jobs, and the investment might range between 250K until 500K, you might be able to obtain a fast track, the golden visa. And this does not need, you don't need to be tax resident in Portugal. You may just obtain a visa to legally be here in Portugal, and that is particularly useful for an American that needs to have a legal authorization to be in Portugal, right? But you don't need to be tax resident here. So that's a thing that you need to have in consideration. But again, the legal side should always go hand in hand with the tax side, because it might be useful for the subsequent phase, which is the substance of the activity that will be developed in Portugal. And that brings us to the important tax regimes that I wanted to discuss with you.
Yes, tell us about these.
Yes, the first is the non-habitual tax resident regime, and this is a very famous regime.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This regime was repealed 1st of January 2024.
Okay.
And it was replaced by the IFICI regime that I will discuss afterwards. But for those that have applied to this regime until this period, this will still be in force for the next 10 years, okay? So you can apply it in practice, or see its application in practice in many years now. But the submission or the application to this regime just is no longer possible. And this was a very interesting regime, because it taxed a flat taxation of 20% on certain value-added activities obtained from a Portuguese source, okay, while some foreign source income like dividends, interest, royalties, and rents were usually exempt. Wow. And this was specifically interesting for US residents because there are some situations in which you have to deal with double taxation or the mitigation of double taxation. By using this regime, you could avoid having those discussions. Okay, but this is past, and probably it's just present for those that have applied to this regime until that date. And then we have the EFC regime, which is the successor of the NHR.
Okay.
It is, the objective is to attract highly qualified professionals to become Portuguese tax residents and that are working in strategic sectors. So the underlying idea is that Portugal overall tax burden can be heavy because if you don't apply in a special regime, the tax rates can be high. Unfortunately, I don't have that possibility. And this was implemented to encourage work and innovation. So the EFC regime was basically designed to counterbalance this effect and with the objective of making Portugal more competitive and encouraging international talent to come to Portugal. And from the requirements should be observed not only by the individual, but also from the perspective of the company in which those activities will be developed. And this is a major difference between this regime and the NHR, because when you apply the NHR, you could simply assess the regime. Even without any value-added activity, you could benefit from the exemption that the regime could offer you. But in this case, in order for you to take the positives of the regime, you actually need to develop actively an activity within Portugal. And that is the major difference. Provided that you continue to develop that activity, you can benefit from the exemptions that the regime brings. But if we stop having that activity, the system is put on hold during that period. Okay, so it requires not only effort in the application, but in the maintenance. And I think at the end, it's fair, right? You just give an advantage if the person gives something to the society, either in the innovation or contributes for the investment or for the creation of jobs or whatever, in those sectors that the Portugal that were defined as key to the economic reality. So let me just go into the detail of the regime. So the idea was to attract qualified professionals like scientists, university teachers, engineers, corporate bodies, and specialists in innovative like R&D, startups, or export-oriented sectors. This also includes employment contracts or other activities to be developed in tax residents by tax residents in the Azores on Madeira. We do not know exactly the terms in which this will be defined, but they will be. And then the sectors that are put here on spot are basically on contractual investment tax incentives and activities recognized by public agencies and carry out under the Portuguese state supervisions and like industrial or service companies that may fall under certain eligible sectors, and that may export more than 50% of their turnover. So the benefit is clearly to have access to a flat tax rate of 20%, okay? And if you take in consideration that the general tax rate might range from 14 until 53%, you can see the advantage of having this access to this regime. And at the same time, you can benefit from the exemption of dividends, interests, royalties, rents, and capital gains from foreign source. So if you do something that Portugal values, you can have the exemption in several other foreign source income. So this is really a very good advantage for a relocation in global mobility, sea level or whatever. So I think that is a very good incentive. And this could last for 10 years.
Okay.
So this is really, just to give you an idea, yesterday I just had the opportunity to calculate the benefits for a client. And this was a client that he was an expat of a multinational group in the fashion industry. He just came due to this mobility intra groups. The regime was not considered at the time, but then when he arrived, we decided, well, let's discuss this. Let's see if you are eligible for the application of this regime. And this really, he could see the incentive was really big. And he is also planning not only staying in Portugal for the 3 years that were the initial plan, but also to extend until a few years more, just to take benefit of this important regime.
Yeah.
So,
why not? I don't see why you wouldn't do it. It sounds like a fantastic opportunity to mitigate tax to a very low level. And I know you're going to talk about this here in a little bit, but I keep thinking about that hypothetical client that I mentioned that has the S corporation and maybe employs people here in the U.S. When you create, I guess my question there would be, when you create a business in Portugal and you employ a certain number of people, do they have to be in Portugal, or can they be outside of Portugal?
No. They can. Well, they can be outside Portugal. And to be completely honest, especially since COVID, we saw lots of multinationals looking for Portuguese talent.
Okay.
Especially in the IT business.
Yeah.
So basically they do IT work, back office IT work from Portugal, and that is possible. We have a number of clients that has those types of arrangements. But the situation that probably you want me to comment more is not that back office employee. It's probably situations where the personal and the corporate overlap, right? So probably.
Yeah. Well, feel free to go into that topic. I think
yes, but that's important. I can also share with you another real life example that I had recently.
Okay.
And this was a cross-border executive. Well, it's frequent here. Sometimes executives share the Iberian responsibilities. So we were speaking about a company that had 2 subsidiaries, one in Portugal, another one in Spain, and the CEO was the same. And there was an opportunity for this person to move to Spain. So they from a practical point of view, there was a personal risk because she moved there. So she actually was in Spain for more than half a year. So she was considered a tax resident there, but her family was continued to be in Portugal. So in theory, she could have tax residence in both jurisdictions. And this is where the personal risk is shown, actually occurs. And then at the same time, you had a corporate risk because she is a CEO. She performed duties in different countries. She was in Portugal. She was in Madrid, in Lisbon and Madrid. So, and sometimes she was in Portugal solving issues from Spain, and in Spain solving issues from Portugal. And without noticing, she was leading to a permanent establishment issues here. And that need to be addressed. So a policy, the conclusion was that a policy would need to be put in place. Otherwise, both countries could claim, in this case, a corporate tax residency issues. I can also share a different case that I had with a client that had a company incorporated in Hong Kong, and she was living in Portugal. And my client was the only shareholder and director of that company. We concluded, of course, that there was the active administration could be done from Portugal, because the company would be effectively managed from Portugal. And of course, this also creates a risk that needs to be addressed. And sometimes you tend up, especially on those small businesses in which the structure is small, you tend to forget to address the governance of the company, and that it needs also to be considered in the equation, not only the personal stuff, but also the corporate stuff.
Yeah, I mean, those are two interesting client stories, and I'll stress the word story right there. I think you mentioned this earlier. You've got to get your story. You have to be able to tell your story. It's super, super important. And the big takeaway I have from you is you need time to plan before you come inbound, and you've got to really make sure that your story is on point and that you've got it fully developed out for the way that you're coming in. And you have to consider both the tax and the legal on that. Tell me real quickly about inheritance and gift tax. And so unlike the US, I think is very unique in that we have estate and gift tax. Most every other country has inheritance and gift tax. Walk me through kind of those concepts, and then anything of here, wealth tax, stuff like that.
Yes, well, that's also another important angle about Portugal, is that in Portugal, if you receive inheritance, you must declare it to the tax authorities, and in some cases you need to pay stamp duty. Stamp duty on gifts is generally taxed on the rate of 10% of the transfer value, okay? Although there is a free transfer to spouses, civil partners, descendants, so direct line, there is an exemption. So that's why I think that's an angle that, if well planned, could mean a lot for companies that, or for persons that have assets, big assets at stake. So this could be a very good advantage. Please consider that sometimes there is a small stamp duty applied of 0.5% to donations of real estate, but that's only that. And I'm speaking direct line. Of course, if if it is a free transfer to a friend, to whatever, you need to pay the 10% that I mentioned earlier. And what we see, Portugal also does not have wealth taxation. Of course, if you own assets in excess of a certain threshold, you might need to pay like an additional tax, but it's rather small in comparison with other jurisdictions. And you also have limited wealth declaration. So basically deposits and securities accounts abroad and assets in tax havens. So I think Portugal is still an interesting country to consider, especially if you look to other jurisdictions that are becoming much more aggressive in this respect. So
yeah, absolutely. Let me just quickly kind of interlude for a second with the U.S. side. For the folks listening to the podcast, a couple things to take away here. So when we're talking about the incentives that are still available for the Golden Visa option, the qualified investment, typically those are going to be in some kind of foreign passive investment, which can trigger the PFIC rules in the US. Portugal is one of the few countries that actually I've observed the folks there know the PFIC regime. Out of all the stuff in the US, they know it really well. They do what we call annual QEF statements for a lot of those investments. So it tends to align very well with the US reporting. If you are creating a business in Portugal, obviously, Catarina mentioned the permanent establishment issues, the PE issues. But if you're going to go ahead and create an entity in there and you're a US person, consider that the default treatment will probably be controlled foreign corporations or CFCs, which is probably one of the worst places you could be in the US tax code, although maybe you're not too crazy about having everything pass through on the US side. Because if you did check the box planning, which is your other alternative to be a foreign partnership or foreign disregarded entity, then everything would flow through just like an S corporation. So you got to pick your poison when it comes to creating the business and how you do that. Lastly, just remember that you do have in the US the notorious Foreign Financial Asset Reporting, the FBAR, FATCA, Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it's a mouthful to say that, did give the Treasury Department a little bit more firepower to potentially lower the thresholds for FBAR and 8938 reporting and increase the $10,000 penalties associated with those forms. So maybe instead of having an aggregate maximum balance of $10,000, you might now see $5,000. And instead of a $10,000 penalty, you may see $20,000 penalties. So just keep that in mind, that the IRS is increasing their offshore enforcement. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act has kind of pushed that agenda forward and given them more firepower on that. I think probably to collect revenue is what they're looking for. But there are potential new things coming down the pipe. We may have a new tax bill in the US, yet another tax bill. So the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it may not be the only one. You may get a second one that could have some really good options in it. We'll talk more about that on another podcast. Catarina, anything else you want to mention about Portugal?
Yes, let me just finalize to say that we discussed the legal side, we discussed the tax side from a personal perspective mostly, but let me also address that Portugal is very interesting for those entrepreneurs that want to really invest in Portugal. Okay. So I would also mention the corporate side. So besides, of course, the legal form, the shareholding structure that needs to be considered in advance in order to maximize again all the benefits. It's, for example, the way you fund the business. Mm-hmm. So there are incentives for capitalization of companies that you could consider. There is also incentives for investment and innovation, strictly speaking from the perspective of the company. So we might consider the investment benefits such as refi or R&D and IP patent box regimes. Portugal also has that. As I mentioned before, Portugal has also become a startup hotspot with lots of tech and entrepreneurship going on. So, for example, Web Summit is happening here next November, more than 10 years now. And this has been has created lots of startups. For example, I can say that I don't know if you know Sword Health.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Did you know that this was founded by a Portuguese in Portugal?
No, I did not know that. That's super interesting. That's
yes. Great. Virgílio Bento, it's a Portuguese. He's awesome, and he started his business a few years ago, taking advantage of these startup regimes. So besides the efficacy that I've just explained before, we also have interesting regimes that benefit equity participation. So if you have stock option plans, you can significantly lower your tax rate. So for example, if you make investments in low density regions, you can have extra tax benefits. And of course, you can also benefit if you invest in a certain areas. You can also access EU funding, the EU bazooka.
Yeah.
So you should have that in mind. So, but this needs to be tied with genuine economic substance. So actual activities.
Yeah.
And also, I would like to finalize just by saying that you need to. Americans come from a very different reality. Europe, we are more strict in terms of compliance rules.
Yes.
So I don't know if you have heard about Tax that require advisors to report certain cross-border arrangements.
Yep.
So if we, as tax advisors, know that we have clients that are mainly establishing themselves only basically for tax reasons, this needs to be reported, and that goes to the suggestion that I've made before. You need to plan properly your stay, and to have a story that, of course, you might take advantage of the tax benefits, but you need to have other arguments, personal, corporate, whatever, to take advantage of those regimes, and this needs to be really considered as an important issue in setting up the setup needs to actually reflect the real business purpose.
Absolutely. And I think I'll just reiterate that to the folks at home. That is a very, very serious thing. You can't just go over there, set up a shell company, and just expect to get the benefits of these regimes. Catarina's absolutely right. There's very strict compliance on this kind of stuff. You also need to do a good job, and I toast everybody, your books and records. You can't have shoeboxes of receipts and not have bookkeepers and things that tax people shouldn't. We don't do bookkeeping at the Wolf Group, but I always tell people that are running businesses, get yourself a good bookkeeper. They're worth their weight in gold. Keep all records, at least for U.S. purposes, for at least 6 years. Document. Very, very important. Okay. So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, someone wants to say, hey, Catarina, I want a consultation. I want to come talk to you. I want you to give me some advice. What's the best way to get in touch with you? What does it look like to deal with you and your firm? Tell us a little bit more about that before we close out.
Yes. Well, in summary, I think it was clear that it's important to have this holistic strategy.
Yeah.
So early alignment of residence, family, economic ties is essential. So you don't. I think that was clear. We also need. It's important to make this pre-arrival analysis. Okay, so just to make sure that the structure that you have can fit the Portuguese reality, and because if it doesn't, we need to. It would be important to change it before coming.
Yep.
Otherwise, the result might not be as best as it could be. And of course, you need to synchronize the coordination between residence visa, tax residency, special tax regimes, and having in consideration the timing. So planning in advance is really key to maximize everything. And the way we normally work is, because we are part of an international network, we are often contacted by our folks, and in this case, it would be you, that say, well, Catarina, I have a client. The situation is as follows. Let's work together. And normally what we do, we have this initial meeting with the client to understand objectives, expectations, timeline, to understand if it's necessary to make some preparatory steps in both sides to make sure double taxation is mitigated, or the compliance is met, or the access to the benefit is achieved, and we normally define together a roadmap for that process. In this case, you would cover the US side, I would cover the Portuguese side. That is normally how we work. Of course, that is when good things can happen, but we also support clients after they arrive or during their stay. It really depends on the maximization of the benefit can be done if we have enough time. But I guess that's the advice, the type of advice that you give to your clients, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All day. Well, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's very insightful. There's a lot of ins and outs to Portugal. I learned a lot more about Portugal today, so that's going to help me as a practitioner moving forward with my clients. But certainly, if there's some big changes or updates in Portugal, we'd love to have you come back on the podcast and give us, maybe a Portugal part 2 update. How's that sound?
Yes, of course. Happy to assist you and to collaborate with you.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You've been tuning in to the Essential Tax Podcast with your host, Mishkin Santa. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, thewolfgroup.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.